Chief Justice, members of the United States Congress and the Cabinet, distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. While the setting tonight is familiar, this gathering is just a little bit different. A reminder of the extraordinary times we're in. Throughout our history, presidents have come to this chamber to speak to Congress, to the nation, and to the world, to declare war, to celebrate peace, to announce new plans and possibilities. Tonight, I come to talk about crisis and opportunity, about rebuilding the nation, revitalizing our democracy, and winning the future for America. I stand here tonight, one day shy of the 100th day of my administration. 100 days since I took the oath of office and lifted my hand off our family Bible and inherited a nation, we all did, that was in crisis. The worst pandemic in a century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Now, after just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again.
大家好，现在是拜登上任之后第一次，就是相当于是这个准国情咨文啊，这个也是历史上第一次两个女性站在美国总统身后。现在开始夸自己上任100天之内的这个成就啊，后面做的是这个众议院议长南希·佩洛西，还有这个美国历史上第一个女性副总统 Kamala Harris。
America's rising anew, choosing hope over fear, truth over lies, and light over darkness. After 100 days of rescue and renewal, America is ready for a takeoff, in my view. We're working again, dreaming again, discovering again, and leading the world again.
就是梦
We've
想
shown
一
each
起
other
领导世
and the
界。
world that there's no quit in America, none. 100 days ago, America's house was on fire. We had to act. And thanks to the extraordinary leadership of Speaker Pelosi,
开始夸佩洛西了，
Majority Leader Schumer,
还有
and
这
the
个
overwhelming support of the American people,
舒曼
Democrats,
民主
Independents, and
党这
Republicans,
个的头，
we did act.
参院的头，
Together we passed the American Rescue Plan, one of the
夸
most
自己的这个
consequential
经济
rescue
刺激法案
packages
大撒
in
币法
American
案。
history. We're already seeing the results.
我们已经看到这个我这个经济刺激法案的结果，大家可以看啊，这个本党的总统在这个讲话的时候啊，肯定后面这两个人全都站起来啊，这不全都是本党
After I
的。
promised we'd get 100 million COVID-19 vaccine shots into people's arms in 100 days,
100天之内
we
给
will have
1
provided
亿
over
人次的
220
这
million
个美国
COVID
人
shots in those 100
打
days.
这个疫苗，而现在呢是突破了2亿人次。这个确实防疫是拜登的一个这个最大的这个
With
政
your
绩啊
help,。everyone's help, we're marshaling every federal resource. We've gotten vaccines to nearly 40,000 pharmacies and over 700 community health centers.
欢迎大家给我的视
The
频点
poorest
赞
of
啊
the！ poor can be reached. We're setting up community vaccination sites, developing mobile units to get to hard-to-reach communities. Today, 90% of Americans now live within 5 miles of a vaccination site.
90%的美国人住在这个能够接种疫苗的地方，5迈之内啊，5英里之内。
Right now, right away. Go get vaccinated, America.
现在让美国人都去打这个疫苗啊！哎呦，这两个人又站起来了，这个使劲鼓掌啊！大家可以看见啊！哎呦，这个泰德·克鲁斯也来了，也鼓掌。这个看来防疫成为两党的共识啊。
Less than 1% of the seniors in America are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. 100 days later, 70% of seniors in America over 65 are protected, fully protected.
70%的65岁以上的老人都已经打完了疫苗。
since January, down 80% because of all of you. And more than half of all the adults in America have gotten at least one shot.
超过一半的美国人至少打了1针疫苗。
Glendale, Arizona. I asked the nurse, I said, "What's it like?" She looked at me and she said, "It's like every shot is giving a dose of hope."
哎呦，现在开始这个讲故事了，说这个我在佛罗里达问一个这个护士说你感觉怎么样啊？他说每一剂这个疫苗都给我们更多的希望。观众不多，是因为本来能坐1000多个议员的这个大厅啊，现在因为疫情只能坐200个，而且这200个这个议员呢是先来先得，所以呢想去这个听拜登吹牛的一些议员，包括泰德·克鲁斯这样这个共和党的人呢，也去凑热闹去了。
Hugging their children and grandchildren instead of pressing hands against the window to say goodbye.
又开始动情的讲故事了，说大家能够这个拥抱了，而不是说这个隔着窗户说再见。
You know better than any group of Americans. There's still more work to do to beat this virus.
仍然很多工作需要做来战胜疫情。
I can say, because of you.The American people, our progress these past 100 days against one of the worst pandemics in history has been one of the greatest logistical achievements this country's ever seen.
他说这个疫情也是我们这个 logistic 怎么翻译来着？就是相当于是这个供应链这种的。我们历史上获得最大的成绩。伊丽莎白·沃伦也出现在这里。这个是 Lindsey Graham， 是共和党的资深的参议员。
For many people, it's making all the difference in the world. A single mom in Texas who wrote me, she said she couldn't work, but she said the relief check put food on the table.
开始夸自己的这个给美国人发钱的这个法案，说德州一个妇女给我写信说我没法工作，但是我收到你给我这个支票之后，感觉好多了。还讲弗吉尼亚的一个这个奶奶讲这个故事啊。
One of the defining images, at least from my perspective in this crisis, has been cars lined up for miles, and not people who just barely ever start those cars, nice cars, lined up for miles, waiting for a box of food to be put in their trunk.
说这个
I don't know about you, but I didn't ever think I'd see that in America.
很多车呀排着几英里的这个队，就是为了领救济，有不少呢都是比较好的这个豪车。我从来没有见过美国历史上发生过这样的事情。
That's why the rescue plan.is delivering food and nutrition assistance to millions of Americans facing hunger. And hunger is down sharply already. We're also providing rental assistance. You all know this, but the American people, I want to make sure they understand. Keeping people from being evicted from their homes. Providing loans to small businesses that reopen and keep their employees on the job. During these 100 days,an additional 800,000 Americans enrolled in the Affordable Care Act when I established a special sign-up period to do that. 800,000 in that period.
他说有80万的人，更多的人加入这个奥巴马医保。
investments ever in improving health care for veterans. Critical investments to address the opioid crisis. And maybe most importantly, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, we're on track.To cut child poverty in America in half this year.
这个马上啊，本党的这个2个女人马上身后都站起来鼓掌，因为是本党的这个，大家看人非常少啊，人非常好，一行只能坐1到2个人，非常少。副总统本党的，还有这个众议院的议长，一个是50多岁，一个是80多岁。
300,000 new jobs in 100 days.More jobs in the first.
说我创造了非常非常多的这个就业机会。
More jobs in the first 100 days than any president on record.
他说：“我前100天创造的这个新的工作机会，比这个任何一个美国总统创造的都要多。”
International Monetary Fund
这个也是民主党的这个
is
众议
now
员。
estimating our economy will grow at a rate of more than 6% this year. That will be the
美国
fastest pace
GDP
of
今年
economic
会
growth in this
增
country
长
in
超过
nearly 4
6%。
decades.
但是记着啊，大家记着这个是这个反弹啊，只是暂时的，不可能这个持续到6%以上。
We're in competition with China and other countries to
跟
win the
中国在
21st
竞
century.
争。
We're at a great inflection point in history. We have to do more than just build back better. We have to build back better. We have to compete more strenuously than we have. Throughout our history, if you think about it, public investment in infrastructure has literally transformed America, our attitudes as well as our opportunities. The Transcontinental Railroad, the interstate highways, united 2 oceans and brought a totally new age of progress to the United States of America. Universal public schools and college aid opened wide the doors of opportunity. Scientific breakthroughs took us to the moon. Now we're on Mars, discovering vaccines, gave us the internet, and so much more. These are investments we made together as one country, and investments that only the government was in a position to make. Time and again, they propel us into the future. That's why I proposed the American Jobs Plan, a once-in-a-generation investment in America itself. This is the largest jobs plan since World War II. It creates jobs to upgrade our transportation infrastructure, jobs modernizing our roads, bridges, highways, jobs building ports and airports, rail corridors, transit lines. It's clean water. And today, up to 10 million homes in America and more than 400,000 schools and child care centers have pipes with lead in them, including drinking water. A clear and present danger to our children's health. American Jobs Plan creates jobs replacing 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, so every American can drink clean water.
这个是 Chuck Schumer， 就是现在这个参议院的民主党老大，也是参议院的老大，使劲
And
鼓
the
掌。
process will create thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs. It creates jobs connecting every American with high-speed internet, including 35% of the rural America that still doesn't have it. It's going to help our kids and our businesses succeed in the 21st century economy.
大家可以慢慢看啊，我要去
The
吃
Vice
饭去了，
President to lead this
等一会儿
effort,
回来。
because I know it'll get done. Creates jobs building a modern power grid. Our grids are vulnerable to storms, hacks.
说这个2月份的这个雪灾，不是德州很多人
As we saw
这
in
个
Texas and
停电
elsewhere
了
during the
吗？
winter storms. The American Jobs Plan will create jobs that lay thousands of miles of transmission lines needed to build a resilient and fully clean grid. We can do that. Look, the American Jobs Plan will help millions of people get back to their jobs and back to their careers. 2 million women have dropped out of the workforce during this pandemic. 2 million. And too often because they couldn't get the care they needed to care for their child or care for an elderly parent who needs help. 800,000 families are on the Medicare waiting list right now to get home care for their aging parent or loved one with disability. If you think it's not important, check out in your own district, Democrat or Republican, Democrat or Republican voters. Their great concern, almost as much as their children, is taking care of an elderly loved one who can't be left alone. Medicaid contemplated it, but this plan is going to help those families and create jobs for our caregivers with better wages and better benefits, continuing a cycle of growth. For too long, we've failed to use the most important word when it comes to meeting the climate crisis: jobs. 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 For me, when I think climate change, I think jobs. The American Jobs Plan will put engineers and construction workers to work building more energy-efficient buildings and homes. Electrical workers, IBEW members installing 500,000 charging stations along our highways so we can own the electric car market. Farmers planting cover crops so they can reduce the carbon dioxide in the air and get paid for doing it. Look, think about it. There is simply no reason why the blades for wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh instead of Beijing. No reason. None. No reason. So, folks, there's no reason why American workers can't lead the world in the production of electric vehicles and batteries. I mean, there is no reason. We have the capacity. We're the brightest, best trained people in the world. The American Jobs Plan is going to create millions of good-paying jobs, jobs Americans can raise a family on. As my dad would then say, with a little breathing room. And all the investments in the American Jobs Plan will be guided by one principle: buy American. Buy American. And I might note parenthetically, that does not violate any trade agreement. It's been the law since the 30s. Buy American. American tax dollars are going to be used to buy American products made in America to create American jobs. That's the way it's supposed to be, and it will be in this administration. And I made it clear to all my cabinet people, their ability to give exemptions has been strenuously limited. It will be American products. Now, I know some of you at home are wondering whether these jobs are for you. So many of you, so many of the folks I grew up with, feel left behind, forgotten, in an economy that's so rapidly changing. It's frightening. I want to speak directly to you, because you think about it. That's what people are most worried about. Can I fit in? Independent experts estimate the American Jobs Plan will add millions of jobs and trillions of dollars to economic growth in the years to come. It is an 8-year program. These are good-paying jobs that can't be outsourced. Nearly 90% of the infrastructure jobs created in the American Jobs Plan do not require a college degree. 75% don't require an associate's degree. The American Jobs Plan is a blue-collar blueprint to build America. That's what it is. And it recognizes something I've always said in this chamber and the other. Good guys and women on Wall Street, but Wall Street didn't build this country. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. So that's why I'm calling on Congress to pass Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, and send it to my desk so we can support the right to unionize. And by the way, while you're thinking about sending things to my desk, let's raise the minimum wage to $15. No one working 40 hours a week. No one working 40 hours a week should live below the poverty line. We need to ensure greater equity and opportunity for women. And while we're doing this, let's get the Paycheck Fairness Act to my desk as well. Equal pay. It's been much too long. And if you wonder whether it's too long, look behind me. And finally, American jobs plan will be the biggest increase in non-defense research and development on record. We'll see more technological change, and some of you know more about this than I do. We'll see more technological change in the next 10 years than we saw in the last 50. That's how rapidly artificial intelligence and so much more is changing. And we're falling behind the competition with the rest of the world. Decades ago, we used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in America, 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development. Today, Mr. Secretary, that's less than 1%. China and other countries are closing in fast. We have to develop and dominate the products and technologies of the future. Advanced batteries, biotechnology, computer chips, clean energy. The Secretary of Defense can tell you, and those of you who work in national security issues know, the Defense Department has an agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. The people who set up before I came here, and that's been a long time ago, to develop breakthroughs that enhance our national security. That's their only job. And it's a semi-separate agency. It's under the Defense Department. It's led to everything from the discovery of the internet to GPS and so much more that's enhanced our security. The National Institute of Health, the NIH, I believe, should create a similar advanced research projects agency for health. And that would, here's what it would do. It would have a singular purpose: to develop breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. I'll still never forget when we passed a cancer proposal last year as vice president. Almost $9 million going to NIH. And if you excuse the point of personal privilege, I'll never forget you standing, Mitch, and saying, "Name it after my deceased son." It meant a lot. But so many of us have deceased sons, daughters, and relatives who died of cancer. I can think of no more worthy investment. I know of nothing that is more bipartisan. So let's end cancer as we know it. It's within our power. It's within our power to do it. Investments in jobs and infrastructure like the ones we're talking about have often had bipartisan support in the past. Vice President Harris and I met regularly in the Oval Office with Democrats and Republicans and discussed the jobs plan. And I applaud a group of Republican senators who just put forward their own proposal. So let's get to work. I wanted to lay out before the Congress my plan before we got into the deep discussions. I'd like to meet with those who have ideas that are different, they think are better. I welcome those ideas. But the rest of the world is not waiting for us. I just want to be clear. From my perspective, doing nothing is not an option. Look, we can't be so busy competing with one another that we forget the competition that we have with the rest of the world to win the 21st century. Secretary Blinken can tell you, I spent a lot of time with President Xi. Traveled over 17,000 miles with him. Spent, they tell me, over 24 hours in private discussions with him. When he called to congratulate him, we had a 2-hour discussion. He's deadly earnest about becoming the most significant, consequential nation in the world. He and others, autocrats, think that democracy can't compete in the 21st century with autocracies. It takes too long to get consensus. To win that competition for the future, in my view, we also need to make a once-in-a-generation investment in our families and our children. That's why I've introduced the American Families Plan tonight, which addresses 4 of the biggest challenges facing American families and in turn America. First is access to good education. When this nation made 12 years of public education universal in the last century, it made us the best educated, best prepared nation in the world. It's, I believe, the overwhelming reason that propelled us to where we got in the 20th century. But the world's caught up or catching up. They're not waiting. I would say parenthetically, if we were sitting down, we set a bipartisan committee together and said, okay, we're going to decide what we do in terms of government providing for free education.
好的，现在这个开始讲要免费的这个
12
教
years
育
is
了。
enough in the 21st century. I doubt it. 12 years is no longer enough today to compete with the rest of the world in the 21st century.
说免费12年的教育，就
That's
是
why
说
my
小学、
American
初中、
Families
高
Plan
中
guarantees
是
4
已
additional
经不
years
行
of
了。
public education for every person in America, starting as early as we can. The great universities in this country have conducted studies of the last 10 years. It shows that adding 2 years of universal high-quality preschool for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old, no matter what background they come from, puts them in the position to be able to compete all the way through 12 years and increases exponentially their prospect of graduating and going on beyond graduation. The research shows when a young child goes to school, not daycare, they're far more likely to graduate from high school and go to college or something after high school. When you add 2 years of free community college on top of that,
好的，现在开始讲这个今天最新的新闻，就是拜登又是准备一个大花钱法案，1.8万亿美元，就是这个 education 加强这个教育。
invest in historical black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, minority-serving institutions.
包括这个社区大学，想把社区大学呢全都改成免学费。
But their students are just as capable of learning about cybersecurity, just as capable of learning about metallurgy, all the things that are going on that provide those jobs of the future. Jill is a community college professor.
因为他的老婆，美国现在第一夫人呢，也是一个这个社区大学的一个这个教授，并不是说很好的大学，社区大学工作了几十年。看现在呢，向这个美国第一夫人致敬了，都朝着他这个鼓掌。因为现在呢，因为疫情，美国的这个第一夫人呢，并没有邀请嘉宾来。
I've heard it 1,000 times. Joe, any country that out-educates us,
现在是美国是有第一夫人和第二先生。
she'll be deeply involved in leading this effort. Thank you, Jill. Second thing we need, American Families Plan will provide access to quality, affordable child care. We guarantee
伊丽莎白·沃伦就是左派的大佬啊，跟 Bernie Sanders 一样。
When I'm proposing in legislation, we guarantee that low and middle-income families will pay no more than 7% of their income for high-quality care for children up to the age of 5. The most hard-pressed working families won't have to spend a dime. Third, the American Families Plan will finally provide up to 12 weeks of paid leave and medical leave, family medical leave.
以后每年呢都有最多12周，也就是说将近3个月的带薪的假期。
No one should have to choose between a job and a paycheck, or taking care of themselves and their loved ones, or parent, or spouse, or child. And fourth, the American Family Plan puts directly into the pockets of millions of Americans.
这就是今天他这个
We
讲的
expanded
最
tax
新的
credit
这
for
个
every
举
child
措，
in
就
the
是
family.
1.8万亿美元的
Up to
American
$3,000
Family
per
Plan，
child
就是说美国家庭
if you're
的
under 6
这个
years
法
of
案，
age.
也是一个非常花钱1.8万亿美元的法案。
And $3,600 for children over 6 years of age. With 2 parents, 2 kids, that's $7,200 in the pockets that are going to help take care of your family. And that will help more than 65 million children and help cut child care poverty in half. And we can afford it. So we did that in the last piece of legislation we passed. But let's extend that child care tax credit at least through the end of 2025. The American Rescue Plan lowered health care premiums for 9 million Americans who buy their coverage under the Affordable Care Act. I know that's really popular this side of the aisle.
我不知道这个有没有提词器啊，但是没有提词器，大家可以看到啊，它前面有这个稿子，你不用提词器。而且拜登今天在这个白宫已经准备了1天的时间，就是今天晚上演讲。
In addition to my family's plan, I'm going to work with Congress to address this year other critical priorities for American families. The Affordable Care Act has been a lifeline for millions of Americans, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, protecting women's health, and the pandemic has demonstrated how badly it's needed. Let's lower deductibles for working families on the Affordable Care Act. And let's lower prescription drug costs. We know how to do this.
Bernie Sanders.
The last president had that as an objective. We all know how outrageously expensive drugs are in America.
说美国的
In
这个
fact,
药
we
啊
pay
什
the
么
highest prescription
的
drug
太
prices
贵了，这确确实实。
of anywhere in the world, right here in America. Nearly
Bernie
3
Sanders 一直
times
倡议的几十年
the。same drug, nearly 3 times what other countries pay. We have to change that, and we can.
Bernie
Let's do what we
Sanders
talked
看
about for
的
all the
听起来
years
很
I
高
was
兴
down
啊
here。in this body, in Congress. Let's give Medicare the power to save hundreds of billions of dollars by negotiating lower drug prescription prices.
降低这个药品价格，这是 Ted Cruz。Ted Cruz 还是很爱凑热闹的啊。
It won't just help people on Medicare. Lower prescription drug costs for everyone. And the money we save, which is billions of dollars, can go to strengthen the Affordable Care Act and expand Medicare coverage benefits without costing taxpayers an additional penny. It's within our power to do it. Let's do it now.
后面的这两个这个
We've talked about it long
女的也
enough.
是狂
Democrats
站
and
起来鼓
Republicans.
掌。
Let's get it done this year. This is all about a simple premise. Health care should be a right, not a privilege in America.
这个就跟 Bernie Sanders 说的一直一样，就是说医保呢，它是一个人的权利，而并不是说特权。
How do we pay for my jobs and family plan? I made it clear
钱从哪儿来？
we can do it without increasing the deficits. Let's start with what I will not do. I will not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000.
说年收入少于40万美元不会
And
加
the
税，
wealthiest 1% of Americans have just begun to pay their fair share. Just
还
their
让
fair
富
share.
人增加这个税。好，现在是 Mitt Romney 罗姆尼，是典型的这个富人大佬啊，给了个镜头，这个也是说上
Sometimes
去
I
也
have arguments
是
with my
这个非常坏啊。
friends in the Democratic Party. I think you should be able to become a billionaire and a millionaire, but pay your fair share. A recent study shows that 55 of the nation's biggest corporations paid 0 federal tax last year. Those 55 corporations
55%的美国的公司是不交税的，不交联邦税的。这个就包括我们耳熟能详的一些大公司了，亚马逊、Netflix 这个最赚钱的公司。
And the Cayman Islands. And they benefit from tax loopholes and deductions for offshoring jobs and shifting profits overseas.
这次也是因为疫情，国情咨文的这个人数严重限制，本来是能做超过1000人的，但现在只能做200个人，而且是 first come first serve。这个是归向 Mitch McConnell 参议院头下台了。
Not just wealth. We take the top tax bracket for the wealthiest 1% of Americans, those making over $400,000 or more, back up to where it was when George W. Bush was president, when he started, 39.6%. That's where it was when George W. was president.
拜登说：“我给富人加税，并不是说这个比之前要多，只是回到小布什时代的这个富人的这个税率。因为特朗普确实是减税给这个富人减的太多了，现在只是恢复。”
And the IRS is going to crack down on millionaires and billionaires who cheat on their taxes. It's estimated to be billions of dollars by think tanks that are left, right, and center. I'm not looking to punish anybody, but I will not add a tax burden, additional tax burden to the middle class in this country.
They're already paying enough.
I believe what I propose is fair.
这个是美国主要的这个老百姓中产阶级最关心的。
pay for the plans I propose and will create millions of jobs that will grow the economy and enhance our financial standing in the country. When you hear someone say they don't want to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% or corporate America, ask them, whose taxes you want to raise? Instead, whose are going to cut? Look, the big tax cut of 2017. Remember, it was supposed to pay for itself. That was how it was sold.
现在开始这个狂批特朗普的这个减税法案。
Generate vast economic growth. Instead, it added $2 trillion to the deficit.
说这个特朗普减税法案增加了2万亿美元的这个赤字。
Instead of using the tax saving to raise wages and invest in research and development, it poured billions of dollars into the pockets of CEOs.
说让这些这个 CEO 多赚了好多钱。这个刚才看到的是这个共和党的众议院的头麦卡锡。
The pandemic has only made things worse. 20 million Americans lost their job in the pandemic, working and middle-class Americans. At the same time, roughly 650 billionaires in America saw their net worth increase by more than $1 trillion in the same exact period. Let me say it again. 650 people increased their wealth by more than $1 trillion during this pandemic.
因为这个疫情的650个最富的人，他们的这个财富增加了1万亿美元，650个最富的人。
Trickle down economics has never worked. It's time to grow the economy from the bottom and the middle out.
现在是佩洛西和他们还是狂鼓掌。
You know, there's a broad consensus of economists left, right, and center, and they agree what I'm proposing will help create millions of jobs and generate historic economic growth.
这个每个总统都说经济学家全都同意我说的这个理论。特朗普当时也这么说。
Our greatest strength is the power of our example, not just the example of our power. In my conversations with world leaders, and I've spoken to over 38, 40 of them now.
说我跟38到40个这个世界领袖、各国领袖已经通话了。
That America's back. You know what they say?
美国回来了。
The comment I hear most of all from them: So they say, we see America's back, but for how long? But for how long? My fellow Americans, we have to show not just that we're back, but that we're back to stay, and that we aren't going to go it alone.
现在呢，开始说这个国际外交政
We're going to
策
do。it by leading with our
布
allies.
林肯，美国的沟通，
No one nation can deal with all the crises of our time, from terrorism to nuclear proliferation, mass migration,
拜登
cybersecurity,
就是要
climate
跟
change,
这
as well
个
as
盟国一起，
what we're experiencing
来
now,
合作，
pandemics.
不管是对付俄
There's
罗
no
斯还是
wall
对付
high
中国
enough。to keep any virus out. And our own vaccine supply, as it grows to meet our needs, and we're meeting them, will become an arsenal for vaccines for other countries, just as America was an arsenal for democracy for the world.
现在开始推许美国这个给其他国家这个新冠疫苗，就跟美国向其他国家输出这个民主一样。
Will have access before that occurs. Every American have access to be fully covered by COVID-19 for the vaccines we have.
所有的美国人都免费打疫苗。
Look, the climate crisis is not our fight alone, it's a global fight.
气候
The United States accounts, as all of you know, less than 15% of carbon emissions. The rest of the world accounts for 85%.
因为拜登刚刚这
That's
个
why I kept my commitment to
定
rejoin
下
the
了美国
Paris
的目标，
Accord,
就
because
是
if we did
2030
everything
年之
perfectly,
前把所有的
it's not
这
going to
个
matter.
排尾气的汽车呢全
I
都
kept
淘
my
汰掉。
commitment to convene a
只
climate
有
summit
10
right
年
here
时
in
间，
America
是不知道能不
with
能
all the
实现。
major economies of the world: China, Russia, India, European Union. And I said I'd do it in my first 100 days. I want to be very blunt about it. I had my attempt was to make sure that the world could see there was a consensus, that we are at an inflection point in history. The consensus is if we act to save the planet, we can create millions of jobs
开始说这个保护
and
地
economic
球
growth and
能
opportunity to
够
raise the
创造
standard
很
of living
多的
almost
就业
everyone
机
around the
会，
world.
跟特朗普这个不承
If you
认
watched
气
any
候
of it,
危
you were all
机
busy.
是
I'm sure
相
you
反
didn't have
的。
much time. That's what virtually every nation said, even the ones that aren't doing their fair share. The investments I proposed tonight also advance the foreign policy, in my view, that benefits the middle class. That means making sure every nation plays by the same rules in the global economy,
好的，
including
要开
China.
始说中国了，说
My
这个
discussions,
让
in my
任何
discussions
国
with
家
President Xi,
都
I told
要
him, we
跟
welcome
习
the
近平开
competition,
始说了，必须得跟
We're not looking
尊
for
重这个
conflict.
国际的规则，
but I
但是
made
规则
absolutely clear
是人定的，是美
that
国
we
定的。
will defend America's interest across the board. America will stand up to unfair trade practices that undercut American workers and American industries, like subsidies
一说这个
from
肯定
state
就
to
是
state-owned
要扯中
operations
国
and
了，没
enterprises,
办法。
and the theft of American technology and intellectual property. I also told President Xi that we'll maintain a strong military presence in the Indo-Pacific, just as we do with NATO and Europe. Not to start a conflict, but to prevent one.
好的，现在拜登明确说，跟习近平已经交代了，会在这个太平洋部署军队，并不是说要打仗，而是维持这
Told them what
个
I
军
said
力。
to many world leaders, that America will not back away from our commitments, our commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to our alliances. And I pointed out to him, no responsible American president could remain silent when basic human rights are being so blatantly violated.
开始说这个人
An
权
American
问题，
president has to represent the essence of what our country stands for.
又是暗指这个
America
特朗
is an
普。
idea, the most unique idea in history. We are created, all of us, equal.
说人人平
It's who we
等。
are. And we cannot walk away from that principle
拜登
and
就
in
是
fact
总
say
表现自己
we're
逼格
dealing
比
with
较
the
高啊
American
这
idea.
个是这
With
个
regard
布
to
林肯
Russia,
相当于是外
I
交
know
部
it
长郭
concerns
靖
some of you, but I made very clear to Putin
说，我给普
that
京
we're not
说
going
了
to，seek escalation. But their actions will have consequences. They turn out to be true, and they turned out to be true. So I responded directly and proportionally. to Russia's interference in our elections and the cyber attacks on our government and our business.
说俄罗斯干涉我们的这个大选，
Of these things.
还有这
And I
个
told them we would respond, and we have.
网上的攻
We
击，
can also
我们会
cooperate
反击的。
when it's our mutual interest. We did it when we extended the New START Treaty on nuclear arms, and we're working to do it on climate change. But he understands we will respond.
就是警
On
告普
Iran and
京，
North Korea,
还有北
nuclear
朝鲜，
programs that present serious threats to American security and the security of the world. We're going to be working closely with our allies to address the threats posed by both of these countries through diplomacy as well as stern deterrence. And American leadership means ending the forever war in Afghanistan.
好，现在开始说从阿富汗撤军的问题。Bernie Sanders 站起来带头这个鼓掌啊，民主党那边的全都是开始鼓掌，共和党的全都坐着不吭声。
Without hyperbole, the greatest fighting force in the history of the world. I'm the first president in 40 years who knows what it means to have a son serving in a war zone.
好的，他说是过去40年我是美国第一个总统，就是我儿子参军的。
We have service members in Afghanistan who are not yet born on 9/11. The war in Afghanistan, as we remember the debates
这个
here,
是美国
were
国
never meant
国
to
防
be
部长，第一个就是
multi-generational
黑任国防部
undertakings
长。
of nation building. We went to Afghanistan to get the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11. And we said we would follow Osama bin Laden to the gates of hell to do it.
说9幺之后，我
Been in
们
the
就
upper
说我
Konar
们
Valley,
要
you've kind of seen the
抓
gates
这个
of
本
hell.
拉登，这是罗姆尼。
And we delivered justice to bin Laden. We degraded the terrorist threat of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. And after 20 years of valor, and sacrifice, it's time to bring those troops home.
说已经战争20年了，应该让美国这个联席会主席，就是军队的头，国防部长，这个是
Even
参议
as
院
we
的
do,
头。
we'll maintain over-the-horizon capacity to suppress future threats to the homeland. And make no mistake, in 20 years, terrorism has metastasized. The threat has evolved way beyond Afghanistan. Those of you in the intelligence committees, the foreign relations committee, defense committees, you know well, we have to remain vigilant against the threats to the United States wherever they come from. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are in Yemen, Syria, Somalia,
说不
other
只
places
是
in
阿
Africa,
富
in the
汗
Middle， East and beyond.
各个地方都有这个
And
威
we
胁。
won't ignore what our intelligence agencies have determined to be the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today.
我们要相信我们这个情报部人的
White
情报部门的
supremacy
人
is
的这个信
terrorism.
息，就跟这个特朗普
We're
相
not
反
going。to ignore that either. My fellow Americans, look, we have to come together to heal the soul of this nation. It was nearly a year ago before her father's funeral when I spoke with Gianna Floyd, George Floyd's young daughter.
说弗
She's
洛
a
伊德
little
的事儿
tight, so I
了，
was kneeling down to talk to her so I could look her in the eye. She looked at me, she said, "My daddy changed the world." Well,
说弗洛伊德女儿说
after
是我
the
父
conviction
亲
of
改变
George
了世
Floyd's
界。
murder, we can see how right she was if we have the courage to act as a Congress.
应该
We've all
说，
seen the knee of injustice on the neck of Black Americans.
美国的这个种族问题，
To make some real progress. The vast majority of men and women wearing a uniform and a badge serve our communities, and they serve them honorably. I know them. I know they want.
绝大部分的执法者还是很好的。这个是加州的民主党的这个参议员，前几天也是到这个弗洛伊德警官这个宣判之前到这个明尼苏达是
moment as well.
这个浇了一把火，火上加油啊！就是说，不判他有罪的话，我们要这个接着斗
To
争。
rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve. To root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system.
说美
And to
国
enact
的
police reform in George Floyd's name. It passed the House already.
美国的这个
I know
警察改
Republicans have
革、
their
警
own
察制度改
ideas
革，
and are engaged in a very productive discussions
以
with
弗洛伊
Democrats in
德
the
名
Senate.
字命名。
We need to work together to find a consensus. But let's get it done next month, by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death.
说弗洛伊德去世1周年之内呢， 我们应该通过这个改革法案。这个也是值得一提的是，这个
The country supports this reform, and Congress should act. We have a giant opportunity to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice, real justice. And with the plans outlined tonight, we have a real chance to root out systemic racism
也
that
是给
plagues
这
America,
个共和
American
党
life in
的
other
国会
ways.
议员喊话，就说让他们支持通过
Good jobs, good schools, affordable housing,
这个
clean
改
air,
革
clean
法案。
water, being able to generate wealth and pass it down through generations because you haven't access to purchase a house. Real opportunities in the lives of more Americans, Black, white, Latino, Asian Americans, Native Americans. Look, I also want to thank the United States Senate for voting 94-1 to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to protect
好的，
Asian
现在是这
American
个
Pacific Islanders.
对于这个亚裔的反对
Acted
对亚裔犯罪的法案，不是94票赞成1票反对吗？ 一
You
个
see
这
on
个
television the viciousness of the hate crimes
hate crime
we've seen over the
仇恨犯
past
罪
year, and for too long. I urge the House to do the same and send that legislation to my desk, which I will gladly, anxiously sign. I also hope Congress will get to my desk the Equality Act to protect LGBTQ Americans. For all transgender Americans watching at home, especially young people, you're so brave. I want you to know your president has your back. Another thing, let's authorize the Violence Against Women Act, which has been law for 27 years. "27 years ago, I wrote it. It'll close the act that has to be authorized now, will close the boyfriend loophole to keep guns out of the hands of abusers. The court order said this is an abuser. You can't own a gun. It's to close that loophole that existed. You know, it's estimated that 50 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner every month in America. 50 a month. Let's pass it and save some lives. And I need not tell anyone this, but gun violence has become an epidemic in America. The flag at the White House was still flying at half-mast for the 8 victims of the mass shooting in Georgia, when 10 more lives were taken in the mass shooting in Colorado. And in the week in between those two events, 250 other Americans were shot dead in the streets of America. 250 shot dead. I know how hard it is to make progress on this issue. In the 90s, we passed universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that hold 100 rounds that can be fired off in seconds. We beat the NRA. Mass shootings and gun violence decline.
好，
Check
现在
out the
开始
report.
讲这个大规模的这个
In
mass
the early
shooting，就是
2000s, the law expired.
枪击案了。
We've seen daily bloodshed since. I'm not saying if the law continued, we wouldn't see bloodshed. More than 2 weeks ago in the Rose Garden, surrounded by some of the bravest people I know, the survivors and families who lost loved ones to gun violence, I laid out several of the Department of Justice actions that are being taken to impact on this epidemic. One of them is banning so-called ghost guns. These are homemade guns built from a kit that includes directions how to finish the firearm. The parts have no serial numbers.
好的，现在说美国很多这个幽灵枪啊，就是说上面没有序号的，是造的这个
The
土
buyers of
枪
these ghost gun kits aren't required to pass any background check.
说需要背景调查才能买枪，而现在呢，就是
Could buy this
说买
kit
枪
and
太
within
容易
30
了。
minutes have a weapon that's lethal, but no more. And I'll do everything in my power to protect the American people from this epidemic of gun violence.
说
But
很多
it's
小孩
time
呢
for
，30
Congress
分
to
钟
act
就
this
能
way.
买一个这个致命的枪，幽灵枪。
Look,
泰德·布鲁斯，这个是德州的，肯定是讨厌这个控枪的。
We need more Senate Republicans to join the overwhelming majority of Democratic colleagues and close the loopholes required in background check purchases of guns. We need a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And don't tell me it can't be done. We did it before and it worked. Talk to most responsible gun owners and hunters. They'll tell you there's no
美国
possible
的枪控
justification
确
for
实
having
最大
100
的阻力
rounds.
不在民间，而在这个国会啊。这个是曼钦，这个是民主党最中间派的这个参议员，只要他一反水，整个的这个法案就过不了了，非常重要啊。
But shouldn't be able to buy a gun. These kinds of reasonable reforms have overwhelming support from the American people, including many gun owners.
看他说这
The
个
country
民意
supports
是有
reform
的，
and Congress should act.
但是这个
This
议
shouldn't
员
be a red or blue issue. And no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. From the very beginning, there were certain guns, weapons, that could not be owned by Americans. Certain people could not own those weapons ever. We're not changing the Constitution. We're being reasonable. I think this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. I think it's an American issue. And here's what else we can do. Immigration has always been essential to America.
现在又开始说这个
Let's
移民
end
了。
our exhausting war over immigration. For more than 30 years, politicians have talked about immigration reform, and we've done nothing about it.
说过去30年，这个政治家只是讲移
On
民，
day
但
one
是
of
什么
my
都不做。
presidency, I kept my commitment and sent a comprehensive immigration bill to the United States Congress. If you believe we need to secure the border, pass it because it has a lot of money for high-tech border security. If you believe in a pathway to citizenship, pass it. It's over 11 million undocumented folks,
现
the
在已经
vast
讲了1个小
majority
时，
of
确
here
实拜登有点累
overstayed
了啊。
visas. Pass it. We can actually, if you actually want to solve a problem, I've sent a bill to take a close look at it. We also have to get at the root problem of why people are fleeing, particularly to our southern border from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The violence, the corruption, the gangs, the political instability, hunger, hurricanes, earthquakes, natural disasters. When I was president, when I was vice president, the president asked me to focus on providing help needed to address the root causes of migration. And to help keep people in their own countries instead of being forced to leave. The plan was working, but the last administration decided it was not worth it.
现在开始夸
I'm
这个奥巴
restoring
马
the
政府，
program
然
and
后
asked Vice
批这个
President
川普
Harris to
政
lead
府。
our diplomatic effort to take care of this. I have absolute confidence she'll get the job done. Now look, if you don't like my plan, let's at least pass what we all agree on. Congress needs to pass legislation this year to finally secure protection for dreamers.
好的，现在开这个美国，开始讲美国的这个
Only
梦
now
想小孩，
America's their home.
就是小的时候跟着这个非法移民妇一起进
Permanent
美国的
protection
打
for
卡。
immigrants who are here on temporary protective status who came from countries beset by man-made and natural-made violence and disaster. As well as a pathway to citizenship for farm workers who put food on our tables. Look, immigrants have done so much for America during this pandemic and throughout our history.
说美国的移民非常重要，这个确确实实是。
We should act. Let's argue over it. Let's debate it. But let's act. And if we truly want to restore the soul of America, we need to protect the sacred right to vote. Most people more people voted in the last presidential election than any time in American history.
现在讲
In
这
the middle of the
个
worst pandemic ever.
应该让老百姓有权利去
It should
投
be
票。
celebrated. Instead, it's being attacked. Congress should pass H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and send it to my desk right away. The country supports it.
这个是
And
当初
Congress should
把
act now.
拜登拯救的人就是南卡罗来纳州的这个黑人资深的这个民主党的众议员。本来拜登去年初选都快输的时候，这哥们儿把他给拯救了。
Lives were lost. Extraordinary courage was summoned. The insurrection was an existential crisis, a test of whether our democracy could survive, and it did.
现在讲1月6号的时候，川粉
The question of whether our democracy
川粉攻击这个国会这事儿
ancient and urgent, as old as our republic, still vital today. Can our democracy deliver on its promise that all of us, created equal in the image of God, had a chance to lead lives of dignity, respect, and possibility? Can our democracy deliver to the most pressing needs of our people? Can our democracy overcome the lies, anger, hate, and fears that have pulled us apart? America's adversaries, the autocrats of the world, are betting we can't. And I promise you, they're betting we can't. They believe we're too full of anger and division and rage. They look at the images of the mob that assaulted the Capitol as proof that the sun is setting on American democracy. But they're wrong. You know it, I know it. But we have to prove them wrong. We have to prove democracy still works, that our government still works, and we can deliver for our people. In our first 100 days together, we've acted to restore people's faith in democracy and deliver. We're vaccinating the nation. We're creating hundreds of thousands of new jobs. We're delivering real results to people. They can see it, feel it in their own lives. Opening doors of opportunity, guaranteeing some more fairness and justice. That's the essence of America. That's democracy in action. Our Constitution opens with the words, as trite as it sounds, we the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government. You and I. Not some force in a distant capital. Not some powerful force that we have no control over. It's us. It's we the people.
现在拜登又来劲儿了。
In another era, when our democracy was tested, Franklin Roosevelt reminded us, in America, we do our part. We all do our part. That's all I'm asking. That we do our part, all of us. That if we do that, we will meet the center challenge of the age by proving that democracy is durable and strong. Autocrats will not win the future. We will. America will. And the future belongs to America.
专制没法
As I
赢
stand
得
here
未来，
tonight
而美
before
国的
you in
民
a
主
new
可以
and。vital hour of life and democracy of our nation, and I can say with absolute confidence, I have never been more confident or optimistic about America. Not because I'm president, because what's happening with the American people.
拜登说：“我对美国充满
We've
信
stared into
心。
the abyss of insurrection and autocracy, pandemic and pain, and we, the people, did not flinch. At the very moment our adversaries were certain we'd pull apart and fail, we came together, we united. With light and hope, we summoned a new strength, new resolve to position us to win the competition of the 21st century. On our way to a union more perfect, more prosperous, and more just, as one people, one nation, and one America. Folks, as I told every world leader I've ever met with over the years, it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America, and it still isn't. We're the United States of America. There is not a single thing, nothing beyond our capacity. We can do whatever we set our minds to if we do it together. So let's begin to get together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you for your patience.
讲完了，现在讲了1个小时010分钟，讲完了。我说，怪不得这个拜登这个突然是高潮有劲儿了，现在是这个碰肘，可以见下面是稀稀拉拉的。
A president 100 days in with a big plan to overhaul America. You're watching a Washington Post special
马上拿这
report
个口罩啊，戴上口罩，为这
President
个
Biden called it
美
a
国
time of
人民
crisis
做个
and
表率。
opportunity. He
这
hit
个
Wall
后面
Street
2个女
and
的都
pitched
很高兴
sweeping
啊，
new
这个佩洛
programs
西和
from
卡马
jobs
哈
to
瑞斯。
education to finding a cure for cancer.
跟大家一起
We
看
heard
的是《华盛
headlines
顿邮
tonight
报》
on
的这个
immigration,
Amy 克
race
布莎。
relations, and child care. In about 5 minutes, we'll hear the
这个
Republican
美国军方
response
的头
from
儿。
Senator Tim Scott of South
好
Carolina.
了，
But
这个
first, let's go over the big
Bernie
headlines as
Sanders
we
还有
watch
这个
President
民
Biden
主
as he
党
makes
的
his
这
way
个
out of the
黑人
chambers,
女
talking with
众议员。
Congresswoman Maxine Waters right there, flanked by Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, as well as the
Bernie
chairman of the
Sanders 觉得
Joint
很
Chiefs
开
of
心啊，
Staff, General Milley, the one representative from the military tonight.
这都是
Only
这个
two
民主
cabinet
党的
members in
本党
attendance. A
员，第
reminder
一
that
夫人。
only the Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, the Chief Justice, was there representing the Supreme Court. I'm proud to say I've also seen our Washington Post photographer, Melina Mara, there in the mix, getting some great photographs tonight as it's sparse attendance by journalists there, capturing
Bernie
this moment.
Sanders 非常强劲
Because of
啊，面带
coronavirus
微笑，戴着口
precautions,
罩，
only
站在拜
200
登
people
旁
there in the
边，
chamber tonight instead of
也
the
不像
typical
去年这个输给拜
1,600.
登这个党内初选了
Let's。go to Joyce Koh, who's outside of the White House tonight, and talk about the major headlines. Joyce, what stands out to you?
Well, Libby, one of the first things that President Biden spoke about in
亚
his
裔女
speech
记者
tonight was the success that his administration has had on addressing the coronavirus and COVID relief. He touted that American Rescue Plan, really celebrated getting
现在他
200,
不
more
知
than
道这
200
个拜
million
登是
doses
在
of
抓着谁的手啊，
coronavirus
我也
vaccines
现在也
into
看不出来这
Americans'
个
arms.
这
He
个女的
also
是
talked
谁，这个
about
侧
the
面儿不给
relief
镜
checks
头，
that Americans
我
saw
不知道
after
他是
that
谁。
American Rescue Plan passed. And he really used the
这
American
个不知
Rescue
道是
Plan
谁
to
啊？
tee up the priorities that he has going forward. And this was largely a speech on economic recovery. We heard him talk about that American Jobs Plan. That's a $2 trillion plan that he is pitching. He says that the American Jobs Plan is, quote, a blue-collar blueprint to build
这
America.
这些这个
He
女
spoke
议
about
员
some
也
of
是
those
穿的花里
jobs,
胡哨，像
including
这个中国大妈。
addressing issues like replacing 100% of the nation's lead pipes, addressing climate change through increasing this amount of thousands of jobs.
Bernie
And he
Sanders
said
迟迟不
that
愿意离
these
开
jobs
这个
would
C 位
not
啊。
require, the majority of them would not require a college education. He also really tied in the competition that the U.S. is facing with countries abroad, including China. He mentioned China numerous times throughout this, saying that America is falling behind its competitors. So through this jobs plan, he hopes to address that as well. He also talked about the
这些应该
American
是这
Families
个
Plan,
女议员。
something that was released by the White House today. It's a $1.8 trillion plan. He said it includes funding for 4 more years of public education, which would be
不知道
free
这个人是
community
谁，这个
college
真不知道
tuition.
是谁。
It also includes paid family leave and affordable child care. How he will pay for this, he says he will not tax or increase taxes for anyone making under $400,000 a year. He said that this will be paid for through corporate taxes, corporate America, and also the wealthiest 1% of Americans. While Biden did mention things like pulling troops from Afghanistan by September 11th of this year, as well as urging Congress to pass that George Floyd Justice and Policing bill. I think this was largely an economic recovery speech. We heard Biden pitching really the solution to the majority of the problems that the country is facing,
因为拜
being
登是这
sort
个
of
狂
tied
花
within
钱，而
these
这
two
个
plans,
钱
the
从哪儿
jobs
来呢？拜
and the
登也
families
是
plans.
解决方案
Libby,
是说
thanks so
不给
much,
中
Joyce
产加
Koh, live
税，
for us
只
outside
给
of the
这个
White House.
富人
Let's go
和
to
大
Rhonda
公司
Colvin now,
加税。
live on Capitol Hill tonight. So, Rhonda, some of the things that President Biden mentioned are dreams of Democrats, liberals in particular, but do not have big prospects in Congress. So let's talk through sort of the reality check here of where Congress is at on some of the issues and
拜登也
items
是在下
that
面
President
频频
Biden
跟
pitched
这个
tonight.
其他大佬在这儿说
Well,
话，
a
显
lot
示
of
这个
his
亲
phrasing
民
of。some of these really ambitious plans, the American Families Plan, the American Jobs Plan, these are $2 trillion bills that he needs to
好
get
的，
through.
欢
He
迎
needs to
这
get that
个
support. What the reality is,
欢
at
迎
least with the infrastructure
这位
package, is
观众，
Republicans
这个
are
非
saying
常
it's way
有
too
名的一位
expensive.
观
It
众啊，
includes
这
things
个
that
加
don't
入
deal
我的会
with
员频道。
the physical infrastructure, deal more with
这位
roads
观众呢也
and
是
bridges.
这个
There's
在
also
加州，也
programs
是
that
这个
would
Stone 季
expand
的这个粉
Medicaid
丝啊，
to
经
help
常
the
在
elderly
下面
and
留言
disabled.
给
And
我
they
讲
said
这个
those things
Stone
need to
季
be
哪一
standalone
期
bills.
说
So
什
those
么
are
了。
fights that you will probably continue to hear
提
about
供
in
很
the
多
weeks
信息，
ahead.
欢
But
迎
there
您
are
支持。
negotiations going on Senator Manchin, who we did see in the chamber tonight. He is one of those key people who is meeting with Senate Republicans to see if they can figure out a plan on that infrastructure bill. But President Biden spent a lot of time talking about that bill, talking about these ambitious measures, and in some of the ways that he phrased it, it was hard to argue with, and will probably be hard for Republicans to argue with. He talked about taking
现在也是握手了呀，也是不少人这个跟拜登握手，也不在乎那么多了。尤其是这个共和党的啊，因为拜登毕竟已经打完2针疫苗了，所以这个他也不是特担心，现在只是这个戴一下口罩啊，这个做一下样子。这个应该是共和党的这个议员，现在他走到这个对方共和党的区了。这个还是民主党这个拯救了拜登去年这个初选的。这个黑人不知道是谁，不知道是哪个议员。
So I just wanted to note that he was taking a moment there to speak to a Republican. So Rhonda, let's get back to the things that President Biden talked about that do not have a prospect of bipartisan support in the Senate, for example, in a major way. I'm thinking of the labor union bill.
因为马上就到5月了，这个5月，这个人们常说这个 sell in May and go away， 这个我不知道今年5月份股票怎么样啊？这个传统上4月份是对股市非常强的，而5月份呢是对股市比较差的，这个要大家自己做决定。
You have often seen a lot of rigid opposition to any sort of gun legislation. Right now, what Senate Republicans are saying, they think the bill that the House has passed that would close some loopholes, extend background checks, they say that's too broad, that it includes family transfers of guns, and they don't think that that's appropriate. So that's something that is probably a hard sell to this group of Republicans, but it is being talked about on the Hill, and that's something that I do think is interesting about this time and place we're in right now, is that these bills, even though they're ambitious, even though they aren't exactly popular, they are being discussed. So that's at least the first step in Congress. Now, there are so many issues and so many things he laid out that, of course, can they do this all in
这个我猜是这个共和党的这个议员啊，这个大家可以看啊，离得非常近啊，说话。打完疫苗之后，也不是在乎那么多了，他们还在这个接着说话。好的，这个是这个民主党的这个众议员，就是前一段跟这个中国的这个女的说什么有关系的这个去年选总统的。
Who's about to give this response soon, he also says he thinks this could move rather quickly. So to hear that from two people from different chambers who, when I covered that reform bill back in the summer after George Floyd died, their talks had stalled. They both said they weren't talking to each other. Now they're talking with some momentum and some urgency, which is different. So I guess this is all to say that, yes, President Biden laid out a lot of ambitious things. The Senate, of course, is a deliberative body, but there are talks. There are talks happening on the Hill. One of the things that stood out to me, too, it was subtle, but maybe not so subtle. Joe Biden mentioned several times his work in Congress. He talked about when I was here. He referenced, passing the Violence Against Women Act.
就是这个亚裔呢，应该是一个这个保安这种，就是保镖，因为这个亚裔呢，平时出现的非常非常多，就是这个亚裔，非常抢镜啊。
One of the biggest feathers in his cap is he can come to this chamber, talk in a language and in a posture that they can identify as something that they understand as well.
James, the president is making a very slow egress from the chamber, and you have to wonder how the sergeant at arms is feeling and the Secret Service is feeling about this. But James, it feels like Senator Joe Biden, you're going over to the House for an address, and we were all wondering how it would play tonight, how it would translate with this sparse crowd. But instead of losing power, it seemed to actually create a little bit of comfort and warmth.
Joe Biden loves rope lines, Libby, and he loves being out there, mixing it up, talking, backhanding with other politicians. and he hasn't been able to do very much of that. He's an old school politician. This is what he loves about the job. And he just kind of went through a laundry list, and I don't mean that in a bad way, of a lot of things, especially in the back half of that speech, things that really aren't going to get done, but that liberals want. You saw the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal from Washington State, just chatting with Biden there. Same with Rosa DeLauro, one of the more liberal members from Connecticut, Bernie Sanders, but also a bunch of moderates like Debbie Dingell and Shirley Bustos from the Midwest. And they're all happy with Biden. It's been a very productive first 100 days. The president reminded everyone at the beginning of what he's accomplished. I thought that the speech really broke down into three parts. The first was talking about what he's accomplished during the first 100 days. The second was focusing on the hard to argue with stuff, the stuff that plays well with blue collar voters, independents, even a lot of Republican rank and file voters. And then after the 10 p.m. hour in the East, when he started talking about gun control, immigration, policing to a lesser extent, the $15 minimum wage, that was stuff that the left wanted to hear from him.
好的，等一会儿呢会有这个对方共和党的这个参议员一个这个黑人参议员呢，共和党参议员也是唯一的一个这个共和党黑人参议员会进行一个这个反驳，就是代表共和党进行对拜登的反驳。
Which is an area that Republicans are eager to hit President Biden on, but there is also a lot of criticism coming at him from immigration advocates, for human rights advocates, about the crisis on the border and the scenario where we find, and our colleague Nick Miroff has been reporting that it was long expected and projected that there could be this surge at the border. So how did he address that, and what questions does it still leave open?
Well, the big way that he tried to frame it tonight was that it's time to have comprehensive immigration reform. And remember, from his first news conference last month, this was the dominant issue that everyone was asking about. It's subsided somewhat. Attention has moved on, but it continues to be a significant problem and has been in the news again this week. And Biden, I think, trying to convey that he's taking it seriously and that he doesn't have his eye off the ball. I think that was part of the miscalculation that led to the announcement on refugees and reducing the cap the week before last, but also trying to say, look, if you want to fix this problem, we need to have a comprehensive solution, and in some ways trying to kick the ball into Congress's court.
James, at the end there, it looked like Republican Congresswoman Representative Malliotakis, who was one of those Republicans who was actually promoting and talking about the fact that she was going to this speech. She's from Long Island in New York. It looked like she was having a moment with the president and even maybe giving him her card or giving him something. And that sort of goes back to that old moment of legislators using that for potentially a photo op, right? Seeing the president pay them some attention as they walk down the aisle. But for her, maybe it was a moment to actually connect with the president of the United States.
Yeah, and Biden very much wants that. One, there's not that many extra Democrats in the House, but Biden's whole campaign was premised on the idea that he had all these relationships on Capitol Hill. She's pretty new. She wasn't there when he was vice president, but that he had really, you saw a throwback to that at one point.
好了，今天就给大家直播这么多了，非常感谢各位跟我一起看这个拜登在上台之后的第一个这个对国会两院的一个这个演讲啊，就是国情咨文。好的，非常感谢各位的收看，如果喜欢的话，别忘了为我视频点赞，我们下视频再见。